Tanse, good afternoon. I'm Creeson Agecoutay. Welcome to APTN National News. People in Manitoba will have a chance to say goodbye to Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Cathy Merrick this week as the provincial government and the AMC announced her upcoming funeral arrangements. Last Friday, the Grand Chief suddenly passed away after collapsing outside a Winnipeg courthouse while speaking to the media. Merrick will lie in state at the Manitoba Legislature in Winnipeg on Wednesday, and the public can pay their respects between noon and 5 p.m. A book of condolences for Merrick's family can also be signed at the Legislature starting at noon today until the rest of the week. A wake service will also take place at the RBC Convention Centre from 5:30 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Wednesday. On Thursday, Merrick and her family will travel to her home of Pimachikamak Cree Nation, where an additional wake service will take place on Friday evening, following a public and family viewing on Saturday. Merrick will then be laid to rest on the same day at the Cross Lake Cemetery. The AMC has appointed Secretariat Chief Betsy Kennedy of War Lake First Nation, who will serve as a spokesperson for the AMC for the time being. BC RCMP is asking the public's help in locating an Indigenous woman who has been missing for more than 2 months. 57-year-old Karen Tessier was last seen in Fort Nelson, BC on Tuesday, July 9th. 5 days later, Tessier's black Dodge Caravan was found in a rural area outside of Fort Nelson, and now RCMP Major Crimes has taken over the case. RCMP say they believe the public has information regarding her disappearance and have not yet come forward. The Fort Nelson First Nation is also offering a $50,000 reward for information that leads to a significant development in the case that includes her whereabouts. Karen Tessier is Indigenous, 5'5", 177 pounds with brown hair and brown eyes. A dedicated tip line has been set up by calling 1-250-561-8888. A New Brunswick RCMP officer has been charged with aggravated assault for allegedly striking a Mi'kmaq woman last June during a course of an arrest. Christina Gillies of the Agecoutay First Nation was allegedly struck in the face last June by an RCMP officer in Richmond Corner, New Brunswick. The incident resulted in 5 broken bones in her face and multiple broken teeth. The Serious Response Incident Team, or CERT, investigates incidents involving actions of police officers and determines if charges should be laid. As a result of this investigation, CERT found probable grounds that Corporal Andrew Whiteway committed a criminal offense. On Monday, Corporal Whiteway was charged with aggravated assault and has to appear before the New Brunswick Provincial Court on October 2nd. New Brunswick RCMP Media Relations Officer Corporal Hans Willett told APTN News Whiteway is on administrative duties, and depending on the court case, RCMP will proceed with appropriate action in accordance with the RCMP Act. A man from the Elsipogtog First Nation was fatally shot by a New Brunswick RCMP officer. It is the 4th police-involved death of an Indigenous person in just 11 days. On Sunday night at around 11:19 p.m., RCMP were called to a wellness check at a home in the First Nation. The First Nation is located about 160 kilometers northeast of Fredericton. According to CERT and New Brunswick RCMP, officers approached a man who was allegedly threatening to harm himself and was carrying a weapon. The man refused to drop the weapon and would not cooperate with police. One officer discharged a taser, which was not effective, and then another officer shot the male. The man was later pronounced dead. The Serious Incident Response Team, or CERT, is now investigating. Now to this week's web poll question. We ask, how confident are you in the ability of the current oversight bodies to investigate police-involved deaths? You have 4 questions here: very confident, somewhat confident, not confident, or unsure. Have your say at www.aptnnews.ca. After 1 month, about 1,800 people of Sandy Bay can finally return home after a wildfire threatened their home in northern Saskatchewan. The Peter Ballantyne Cree Nation made the announcement this morning, adding that the Flanagan fire is now safely contained. About 200 band members stayed behind to protect essential services from a wildfire that was larger than the city of Regina. Buses will start transporting residents at 9 a.m. on Wednesday, and fuel is available at a gas station in Prince Albert for private vehicles. Residents can also get care packages and essential supplies by the band when they return. The leader of the Bloc Québécois has added his name to those opposed to a nuclear waste disposal site at Chalk River, about 200 kilometers northwest of Ottawa. APTN's Fraser Needham has more.
Yves-François Blanchet was joined at a press conference in Ottawa Monday morning by Quebecois First Nation Chief Lance Haymond and Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief for Quebec and Labrador, Ghislain Picard. The Bloc leader says it makes no sense to have a nuclear waste dump less than a kilometre from the Ottawa River.
It is absolutely logical, and the minister himself already said the same thing, to have 1 million cubic meters of nuclear waste being placed at the surface of the ground close to a river, which is, at the end of the day, the source of fresh water for more than 5 million people.
In January, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission gave Chalk River Laboratories the green light to build a near-surface disposal facility to store low-level radioactive waste. In spite of the decision, this has not stopped local Algonquin nations from lobbying against the facility, saying it will negatively affect local wildlife and water supply and was done without proper consultation with First Nations. Haymond says pre-construction of the facility is already having a negative impact on local black bears.
Canadian Nuclear Laboratories has begun the pre-construction work for the near-surface disposal facility, which includes now blocking black bears from accessing their dens and setting up sound-deterring devices to drive away the wildlife. These actions are not only illegal under the Wildlife Conservation Act, but violate Algonquin and Anishinaabe customary laws and our profound respect for the wildlife that has coexisted with us on these lands for generations.
Picard adds Ottawa must live up to its commitment to consult First Nations before making major decisions like this one.
And that Canada has to abide by its own commitments, a commitment which translates in the adoption of Bill 15 back in June of 2021, which really commands Canada to adjust its framework to align with the principles of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And
APTN News reached out to the Department of Environment and Climate Change for comment, but did not hear back by airtime. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
We're always looking for your feedback or story ideas. Here's how you can continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, go to www.aptnnews.ca. You can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. A number of up-and-coming Indigenous comedians recently gathered in Winnipeg. We'll take you to the show when we come back. We're back in about 3 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back. The various First Nations of Treaty 4 territory in Saskatchewan is hosting a big celebration this year. It has been 150 years since the historic signing of Treaty 4 between the First Nations, the Crown, and the federal government. CTV's Mick Fable takes us to the festivities near Fort Qu'Appelle.
Just outside of Fort Qu'Appelle, a significant gathering is taking place. For the next week, hundreds of people from many nations across Saskatchewan and afar will be coming together for the 150th anniversary of the signing of Treaty 4. The gathering historically has been a time when nations can meet, mingle, and discuss topics impacting their communities.
Well, it's a very exciting week, right? This coming week, there's meetings inside meetings. There's things that are happening right now. There's a climate change conference going on for our young people, community development. All those things are happening inside the gathering in itself.
For those on the grounds, it's a time to remember the generations who have come before, who have lived through the tough times.
As First Nations, when we celebrate together. And what we're celebrating is the resilience of us being here, surviving. That's what we're celebrating.
Within the camp, a tent has been set up for Anishinaabe nations to sit and visit with their relatives. Everyone is welcome. A good conversation starter of the treaty signing when there were lines and territories within the camps of the nations.
They all camped separately, it wasn't here and there and here and there. And today we look around, we hear the nice humming whir of generators, the RVs, the trailers. And 150 years ago, it would have been all teepees, horses. So it was a very different landscape, but we're all here again.
All of the leaders of the nations within Treaty 4 are expected to be at the gathering, including some special guests. A powwow will be held over the weekend as well. Mick Fable, CTV News, near Fort Qu'Appelle.
Love that valley. 6 of some of Winnipeg's best Indigenous comedians took the stage at the West End Cultural Centre in Winnipeg on Friday night. Our reporter Sav Jonza was also there to have a laugh and meet some of the performers.
Taylor Page loves to make people laugh, especially with jokes about Indigenous culture.
When you're in a room full of Indigenous people, everyone's just there to have a good time. It's all about storytelling. It's so many laughs, and it's full body laughs.
She's part of the Bannock Bums, an Indigenous comedy showcase that's been making Winnipeggers giggle for the last year and a half.
I actually started off at a Indigenous open mic. I went to just watch, and the host, the comedian who puts that on, Paul Rablowskis, I was walking and he's like, "Taylor, are you going up tonight?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Well, you should." So I did, and I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And it's really great just making people laugh.
On Friday, she and 5 others took to the West End Cultural Centre stage to poke fun at all things Indigenous.
I've got a dog. He's I love him. I don't really know what kind of dog he is, because he's what I'm sure most of you know, he's what's known as a resmut. Yeah. Although he has been affected by being in the city a little too much lately. He only eats his kibble if there's Parmesan on it.
Proceeds from the event went to support the West End Resource Centre, a non-profit organization offering services like food security, employment assistance, and housing support to community members in the West End area. Jeff Gobeil was happy to lend a punchline to the cause. A social work student by day, he says there's been a resurgence in Indigenous comedy, though the comedians have always been here.
Growing up, I didn't see a lot of Native people in media, but I did have a Don Burnstick cassette tape that I just played till it broke. Had a huge influence on me. I thought if you had a recording on cassette tape that you were world famous. So to me, it was really cool to hear a Native person be world famous and be extremely funny. Comedy was a bit of a bridge between my parents who were divorced growing up. So me running around stealing all his jokes just worked perfect for a young me.
In Native culture too, like I said, we also have movies, lots of shows coming out, and they even just dubbed Star Wars officially into the language, into Anishinaabe. Did anyone watch this? Yeah, some people. Yeah, it's amazing. When the trailer came out though, I was blown away by Native Chewbacca. I was stunned, man. Him and his crossbow there, big furry guy, being like,
Audience member Amanda Burwell isn't Indigenous, but says everyone should support Indigenous arts.
I just find that Indigenous people need to be more in the media and more represented, and Canada's multicultural, so we should accept our first culture, which is Indigenous, and then have everyone educated but also accepting of it. And you can get more accepting of it the more you're around it.
Gobeil says you can find out when more Indigenous comedy is happening through the Winnipeg Comedy Show's Instagram. Sav Jonza, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thank you, Sav. Listen up, teachers and parents. A new Indigenous 2S LGBTQ+ book and resource is now out on bookshelves. We'll speak to the author of the book when we come back in less than 3 minutes. Stick around.
We're here in Port McNeill, BC on Vancouver Island, where the Numgees First Nation and Katera have partnered to create a land-based fish farm. We'll have more on that story later this week on APTN National News.
Over on the east, Halifax 19, Fredericton 19. Cartwright 17, the Grand River 9. 16 in Gaspé, Saguenay 13. Windsor 18, Sarnia 21. Timmins 24, Thunder Bay 18. 20 in Norway House, Thompson 17. Winnipeg 20, Gimli 19. Swift Current 12, Saskatoon 12. Larange 13, Stony Rapids 12. Fort McMurray 19, Peace River 21. Calgary 18, Edmonton 20. Penticton 24, Campbell River 19. Fort Nelson 19, Smithers 20. Whitehorse 14, Rock River 11. Yellowknife 12, Wrigley 16. Sax Harbor 4, Colville Lake 11. 10 in Chesterfield, Baker Lake 10. And Iqaluit 7 and Iqaluit 5.
A new graphic novel focusing on the mental health of Indigenous 2S LGBTQ+ people releases today for World Suicide Prevention Day. Between the Pipes is a coming-of-age story about a Cree teen boy struggling to accept his 2S LGBTQ+ identity, while experiencing the pressures of toxic masculinity from some of his hockey teammates. As it says in Between the Pipes, real strength and change can't come from a place of shame. We recently spoke to author and Two-Spirit elder Albert McLeod, along with research affiliate for the book, Elaine Murdoch. Here's that interview. Thank you both for being here. Albert, I'll start with you. Can you tell us about Between the Pipes and why you wanted to write this book?
Well, on September 10th is the World Suicide Prevention Awareness Day. And this graphic novel really is about focusing on Indigenous youth and the right to play sports as, Two-Spirit or LGBTQI youth, and that it is sports is a healthy way of living, but also with your mental health. So it really is about a young gay man who plays hockey, who comes out as a youth.
Was there a reason why you chose hockey as the sport?
Well, I think hockey is very popular amongst Indigenous peoples in North America, and it really is about masculinity and identity, and so we wanted to talk about how some youth struggle with their gender identity or sexual orientation, and just finding a way out of that anxiety or trauma to come to a place where they feel okay about themselves and can move on with their lives.
Elaine, this one's for you. A 2023 report by the Trevor Project on Mental Health and Well-Being of Indigenous 2S LGBTQ youth in the United States found that over half of those surveyed have seriously considered suicide, and nearly a quarter have attempted suicide. Elaine, can you share what you found during your research into suicide prevention for the community and how we can apply that to saving lives in the future?
Okay, well, that's a very important stat to bring out, and there are Canadian ones that would substantiate that too. Mm-hmm. I think that people really need to know that and understand that it is a significant risk. What we heard from the research participants, it was a qualitative study with 9 people in it. Every person had either experienced suicidal ideation, perhaps a suicide attempt, and also knew other people who had gone through that. So it's a bona fide struggle. And I think one of the first things is awareness and facing the double stigma that Two-Spirit people actually endure. One is racism, being Indigenous, and the other is discrimination because they are a sexual minority.
Yeah. No, those are important points to make. Albert, in this story, Chase finds strength and comfort in the encouragement from his Kokum elders and Two-Spirit mentors. What role can our adults play in supporting youth going through self-discovery and mental health challenges?
Well, I think traditionally for Indigenous peoples, particularly parents, that the cultural norms were that we adapted to the reality of our child and not forced our child to be something they are not. So that's pre-contact history about traditions and life philosophies. So it's really in that vein that parents, you know, if they have a child who comes out as transgender male or female, or gay or lesbian, you know, that they adapt to that reality and they will learn from that child, you know, about that particular gift they carry. And I do see it as a gift. It is sort of intentional from the spiritual world. So traditionally people did not, you know, discriminate against other people that were created. And so that was a very strong belief prior to contact.
Elaine, you spoke with members of the Indigenous 2S LGBTQ community to learn about real experiences, and they faced to help inform the book. What were some common issues you heard?
Well, when I think about it, you could almost break it down into two streams. One was resurgence and hope. Very strong message from everybody in there, which was 3 elders, 3 people who were parents, and also 2 spirit people, and then 3 youth. The message was, there is hope. The other message is, there still is struggle. There's lots of struggle. It's very difficult still in this society to be a 2-spirit person, but do not give up. There are helpers along the way.
Yeah, no, those are great, important points to make. We all have family members who are going through this as well, so we all kind of have a personal story there for this. Albert, finally, what do you hope kids will take away from this book?
Well, I think they'll understand, even at an early age of 13, 14, that they belong. They have inalienable inherent rights, and also treaty rights, Métis rights, and Inuit rights, to be citizens of their communities. Like, you know, it is the 21st century, so it is a rights-based approach, and that they should not experience discrimination or rejection or alienation or violence, gender-based violence, because of who they are. I think now we're way beyond that, and I think Indigenous people in Canada can be a beacon around the world about inclusion, particularly for gay and lesbian people and transgender people.
Finally, really quickly, where can people pick up this book?
It will be available at McNally's. You can order it online pre the publication date, which is September the 10th. And I just want to say the Winnipeg Suicide Prevention Network sponsored us with the research. So we have a strong link with suicide prevention. Life promotion.
Yeah. No, it's always good to have good relations out there. We'll have to leave it there. Albert and Elaine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that's your midday newscast for this Tuesday, September 10th. Dennis Ward will be back for your evening newscast in a few hours. Make sure to join us then. From our HQ in Winnipeg and from our staff across the country, hi miigwech, masicho. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again. Ekse.